let's talk about creating disease, because yes, we are
Mm.
made out of energy, and this energy that is circulating in our body has to keep circulating. And by this holding tights and squeezes that you mentioned, we just block that flow of energy, and then in certain spots of our body, just energy keeps being blocked, and boom comes out disease and everything else.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have, like you said, the agency and the power over how to handle this stuff, can we talk about that? Could you please elaborate a little bit more how we can recognize all these blockages in our body,
Yeah.
and what steps actually can we take
Mm-hmm.
in order to start healing on our own
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and release some of this trauma and the
Mm-hmm.
tension and all these
Mm-hmm.
things that we have been holding up, God
Mm-hmm.
knows for how long, in our bodies.
Well, the first thing that you spoke to was disease, right? Whether that's dis-ease or disease and what happens. And I will share a personal story of mine, which again made me seek out healing modalities much more seriously.
Okay.
I think it was like 2009, 2012, something like that. Um, I was teaching a lot. I was working as an actor. I was doing a lot of television. I was running a theater that I owned, a little 60-seat black box theater. I was living in Vancouver at the time. And I was also working at another school. I had a private studio, but I was also working for friends of mine. And I was working myself to the bone.
Yeah.
People were sick. I was teaching for them. I was taking over the people's classes. And I give a lot in my classes. And I also was maybe an angrier person than I am now, but didn't recognize it because I'm Sicilian, I'm Italian, I'm from New York, I have a loud family, we're very passionate, and that all felt normal to me. And I was married at the time, and I remember like screaming at my husband, like for the stupidest things, like, you did your laundry and not mine, like losing it. But I thought that was normal because
Mhm.
that's what was modeled for me, that's what I saw. And I'd be like, I'm Sicilian. Well, that's what we do. That's how we behave. And one day, I think I didn't have school and I was at home, and I got this like not a headache, but something I'd never felt before, which was like this pressure, like my head was in a vice. It was like something was being squeezed in my head, and I tried everything to get rid of it. I didn't know what was wrong. And as the night progressed, it got worse and it started to go down my spine. So I felt it in my back and it went down my spine, and hour after hour it would go down and down and down until I couldn't walk, until the pain in my spine got down to my tailbone and my legs were aching, like aching. I'd never experienced anything like that. I'd never been to the hospital. I'd never been very sick. Um, I couldn't imagine what was going on. And I told my husband when he came home, and I just kind of dealt with it. I think I took some Advil, maybe some Tylenol, which I didn't make a habit of doing, but I was taking things just to try and soothe it, and nothing worked. And the next morning I woke up and he looked at me and he said, "How do you feel today?" And I looked over and I said, "I think I'm dying. Like, I actually think I'm dying. I, 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 I can't think. I can't function. My legs are killing me. I don't know what to do." He packed me up and took me to the hospital. We went to the emergency room and I told them my symptoms, and they rushed me right in. They put a mask on my face and they started testing me and doing spinal taps. And they ended up diagnosing me with viral meningitis. And I didn't know what it was. I couldn't imagine how I got it. And I ended up in the hospital for 3.5 weeks with a PICC line to my heart, all this antiviral medication, because they were able to isolate the virus, but what it caused was meningitis. And if you don't know what meningitis is, right, it's a swelling of the meninges, right? So the membrane around your brain and your spine swells. So that's what was happening. And so over the course of that time, It was a miserable 3.5 weeks. I had 3 weeks of outpatient care after that with again, the PICC line to my heart. A nurse came to the house every day to change my bag of medication. And at that point, I was like, I have to change everything. And it was my nervous system was responding. So it wasn't responding. It was that I had a virus in my system that could have been there for 20 years. It could have been there for 2 weeks. It could have been there for 20 years. But because it's infectious disease, they know so little about it. And I was in the best hospital in North America for what I was being treated for.
Mhm.
They specialize in infectious disease. So even they were like, it could come back. We don't know. But they were very clear with me that my stress level had gotten so high that the virus was unleashed into my system and caused meningitis. So now this is something that I have. It's a condition that I live with, but I've learned to manage it. So I kicked into high gear and got very healthy. I started working with a personal trainer. I changed the way I ate. I had to stay calm. If I tried to, I couldn't work out. I still can't get my heart rate up so high. Otherwise, my head starts to pound and, and it causes stress in my body that then will cause a relapse. So I've had quite a few relapses since then,
Mhm.
only one other hospitalization, but the hospitalization was when I was getting divorced, I was moving, all the things that they say are the most stressful things that could happen were all happening at the same time. And then I went back to the hospital, but it was only a 7-day visit because I knew what it was. I'd already been very, very healthy. I just wasn't paying attention to the amount of stress that I had because the stress wasn't here, right? It was in my body. So if somebody asked me if I was stressed, I'd be like, no, no, I'm fine. But it was here. It was like in my energy. It was in my cells. It was everywhere else. So that was really when life changed. So that was like 2017 that happened again. And life changed drastically after that. I was older. I couldn't handle as much. I went and worked with a doctor in Reno, Nevada. I flew down from Canada. I spent a tremendous amount of money on my health to fill my body with what it needed. My adrenals were shot. There was too much, cortisol being dumped into my system. Um, and then I had a brain scan done, which I recommend for everybody.
Okay.
That there's something called, if you've ever heard of Dr. Amen, he's another wonderful man. Amen is his name. He's all over social media, but he also has some amazing TED Talks, and he's a psychiatrist. And I was started working with biohackers,
Okay.
and they were hacking my health. And it wasn't Eastern, Western medicine. It was all of it. It was whatever works. It was we'll try anything, as long as it's not just popping a pill, as
Mhm.
long as it's not just medication. Go to the doctor and get medicated. Go get medicated. So I was never medicated other than that antiviral medication that I had, which I got out of my system as quickly as possible. The second time I was in the hospital, the biohackers were bringing me chlorella and all these things to cleanse my body so that when I got out, I wasn't a disaster. So one of them said there's the most comprehensive brain scan you can get is called a 3D brain SPECT scan, SPECT.
Okay.
And Dr. Amen is famous for giving these brain scans to people because he says, as a psychiatrist, we're the only doctors who don't look at the organ we're treating. We just medicate. We just prescribe. We listen to the we listen to the symptoms and then we prescribe something. And often that doesn't work and then we have to try something else or then your body gets used to this and then you have to try something else. And so it's a trial and error. But if you can see the brain, you could often see how to treat it properly. So after I was in the hospital and after all these things, I went to see a neurologist, I went to see an ophthalmologist, I went to see all kinds of people because the pressure that I have in my prefrontal cortex is like always, it's constant. And sometimes it's a little better than others, but my head always feels very tight. So there was one machine in Canada, and it happened to be 10 minutes from where I was living. And it's socialized healthcare, so it was free.
Lovely.
And I went and did this scan. And then during the pandemic, my biohackers read it for me. I gave them the CD. the disc that we had, and they read it to me. And what we found was that I had very little blood flow that goes to my prefrontal cortex, and way too much blood that goes to my amygdala, that goes to all the fear centers. So the fear centers are like lit up at all times, and my organizational skills are not very good. But I would blame myself. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I think? Why can't I see? Why can't I organize? Why can't I be on the computer? Why don't I have a way of doing things? Why can't I find anything when I'm looking for it? Which I know is common for a lot of people. But I found out that there was a reason for it and that it wasn't my fault. And that was huge, right? To be able to say, like, well, this is a thing that happens to me, but I can no longer blame myself. All I could do is do things to support my experience, but not blame. So I think it's important that we're properly diagnosed. I think that's the first step in awareness. Is I have a lot of people that go to tons of doctors, but I don't know if you're necessarily going to the right doctors. We go to the ones that we're told to go to, and then they often don't know as much as we need them to, or they're so specialized that there is no holistic approach to anything. So the Fitzmaurice voice work and the Meisner to me became a holistic way of working, a holistic way of thinking of myself, of helping other people think of themselves. So the first step to awareness, and I say this to everybody, is like just notice throughout the day how often you hold your breath. See if you can notice that, right? Can you just notice that? And when you notice, maybe you could take a bigger breath. Maybe you could take a bigger breath. When you can change it, you will. You're not a failure if you can't change it, and you're not a failure if you don't notice it all the time. I'm just somebody who lives in that awareness, so I do notice it all the time. I think of it as a game. I don't get angry when I do it. I go like, oh, look, I'm doing that again. I just get curious. Oh, what's going on? Oh, I'm holding my breath because of this. Okay, I'm going to take a breath, and then I'll be maybe a little more present. The other thing I ask people, which is a very Alexander technique, right, way of working, and which is a part of Fitzmaurice. We use Alexander. It's like, to me, it's a large part of Fitzmaurice, is how much of yourself are you using to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish during the day? And so you might remember me saying, like, I mean, when you wash your dishes, are you using every muscle in your face and your neck and your butt and your leg to wash that dish? What if you used less? What's possible? What does it allow for if you use less? Can you accomplish the same task? Does it feel good or bad? I'm not saying it's going to feel good. I'm saying pay attention. Does it feel better? Oftentimes when we let go of our tension, it doesn't feel better because we're so used to it. We're so familiar with our tension, with our protection, with our survival skills, that once we lose the grip on them, we don't feel good. We get scared until we learn that that's the healthy way to be in our body, until you can get comfortable with having a little more space. So I always say when I'm working with people, I don't want you to go from this to this like that, right? It's that's terrifying. So it's, incrementally, little by little, just asking yourself those questions and then noticing if you can change it. And I say, do it when you're in a place where you feel safe. You know what I mean? Maybe don't do it when you're having that really important meeting and you're trying it out for the first time. Or when you're at, like, I don't know, I work with people who go to award ceremonies all the time and they're like, I want to go through the roof. Like, I want to run out the back door. I want to network. I can't socialize. And these are amazing actors, accomplished people that all have this feeling of anxiety. So I say, I don't know, what happens if you're talking to somebody and you notice your shoulders are up to your ears, and again you take a breath and you think about gravity. You consider gravity and what does it do? What can it cause? And every single time what people report back is, oh my God, I had a joyful experience. In a place I go all the time that I can't stand, that I dread, I all of a sudden had a great time and didn't want to leave. And I did feel my feet on the ground, and I could feel my belly soften, and I could allow a conversation. And all of a sudden, your brain starts to work better too. You don't have to think about what to say because you're so present with somebody, you know exactly what to say. I know I was that. I was debilitatingly shy as a child. I'd be like, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? How am I going to know? So there's flow that comes with that. So does that answer your question just
Oh
in
my
terms
God.
of like how
Absolutely.
to notice? Because I think that was the second part of the question was like, how do you start to notice and bring awareness? And like I
100%.
said, those two things, where is my tension? Am I not breathing? I would start with the, am I holding my breath? Because I think that's the easiest. I think it's the
So,
simplest.
no, thank you for explaining. This was fabulous explanation of the whole thing. So we all know that thoughts create emotion and emotion creates motion, right? So let's go back to the dishwashing example. Now you just come home from like a very dramatic day or a regular day, in New York
Hmm.
City, and then you have received a lot of things, a lot of triggers in your aura, in your
Yeah.
to yourself. And
Hmm.
then you come home, and then your body, as your body keeps the score and your body remembers everything, then you start, once on your own doing the activity, you start remembering all those negative and positive experiences that you just had previously.
Yeah.
And on an unconscious level, these thoughts keep hitting you. And then unconsciously, you start squeezing everywhere,
Hmm.
right? And then that will cause the flow of energy to be blocked
Hmm.
without you even noticing. As this cycle keeps repeating itself like a vicious cycle in your life and becomes
Hmm.
kind of the person that we are, the people, that we encounter,
Hmm.
and it becomes part of our lives if we're not
Hmm.
aware.
Hmm.
And then we cannot get rid of that negative thought. It kind of, our brain gets conditioned.
Hmm.
How do we start unconditioning ourselves from that level of conditioning in this society that we are living in, with
Yeah.
so many things that happen at the same time, especially for us who live in big cities such as New York,
Yeah.
and in a society where a lot is demanded of us. I
Hmm.
mean, you have to just keep doing things, otherwise you will stay behind. So how do we come back to ourselves? How do we manage that positive self-talk and stop conditioning ourselves and unlearn what we have learned for years?
Hmm. Well, I will preface all of this with saying I am not a neuroscientist, and nor am I a therapist. I appreciate and have done copious amounts of research, but there's things I'm going to go back to Fitzmaurice.
Let's do that. Yes.
Fitz because of that. So I do think it's hard to stop the negative thoughts. I certainly work on it all the time, and I actually had a conversation this morning with my mother about being critical of everything and that what it does to the person receiving it, what it does to her own cells, like what it does. And I know not everyone's going to change and not everybody wants it. You have to want to change first,
Mhm.
right? You have to want to recognize that I'm going to destroy myself, right? Like something's not working and I'm suffering, right? Like we don't have to suffer as much as we do. So there has to be some kind of reprogramming. And I do believe in talking to ourselves in a different way. Instead of calling myself stupid for doing something, I try and go, okay, well, that happened. And that's not easy for everybody. And I get that. But it's coupled with all of the somatic work that I do.
Mhm.
So that's why I wanted to go back to Fitzmaurice. Fitzmaurice was designed by a woman named Catherine Fitzmaurice, who I got to learn from and is just an amazing human being. And she graduated from Central School of London in the 60s.
Yes.
And right, she was in class with all the great teachers, Patsy Rotenberg, right? They all studied around the same time. But she said that when she got out of school, she realized that all they talked about was the voice from the waist up, that there was nothing, like as if we didn't have a body below. And there was something that didn't sit right with her. And her husband at the time was working with a man named Wilhelm Reich. And he thought she should meet him and she should do some work with him. because what he had created was a system of trauma therapy called bioenergetics,
Okay.
right? And bioenergetics is a body-based trauma therapy. So he used and she created, right? She took that and ran with it. And so as Fitzmaurice practitioners, what we offer people is something called tremoring.
Yes.
And so, yes, you did it with me. You've
I
done some tremoring. And it's weird for people in the beginning, right? And again, I don't say, like, this is amazing for you and you should do this and you should understand it. It's like, it's an exploration into your curiosity. It
Mhm.
really is. You have to be a curious human. You have to. It's how we were born. We get the curiosity beat out of us as we grow up,
Yes.
right? It's like, stop being so curious. Stop climbing the walls. Stop looking behind the couch. Stop digging. Like, but that's our nature. Our nature is to be curious. So as you said, all of these factors outside of the world cause us to stop being curious and just get that tunnel vision that you said. We have to just get through the day. I have to keep moving. In Vancouver, I used to tell my students, if you stop in New York, you die. If you stop, you get walked right over. So you got to keep moving, move, 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 move. But I'm of a different mind now. It's not that I think we don't have to keep moving. It's that we have to move in a specific way,
Yes.
right? And so the tremor work is inducing um, tension and release into your body at the same time. And we do that using kind of, you know, um, stripped down yoga postures, and we put our bodies in certain positions. We call them dynamic efforts in Fitzmaurice because they continue to move. There's not one pose. It's something that can move and look very different on you than on somebody else. But the idea is that we're working in the central nervous system. So when you're asking your body to be in tension and release at the same time and causing this tremor, right? If I'm like giving into gravity but pushing away from it at the same time, a shake happens.
Yes.
And what it does is confuse the signal to your brain. It confuses the signal. So your brain starts to go, what do you want? Because it's so rational, right? What do you want? Do you want me to let go? Do you want me to have tension? Do you want me to be scared? Do you want me to be open? What do you want? And it does that back and forth, and our brain gets scrambled. And in that scramble, we start to break habits. We start
Oh,
to break vocal, emotional, physical habits. But you have to do it, right? Some people think they'll come to one class and be like, well, I don't, that felt amazing in the moment, but I'm still the same person. I'm like, well, I've been doing this for 15 years, Fitzmaurice, right? It is still a part of my daily life, and I've gotten better and better and better at having agency over my choice, having choice over my responses and how I think. So I think that's the key. I think that, like I said, reprogramming our brain isn't just about talking to it.
yes.
It's about causing our body to show up in a different way. So once we practice our body showing up in a different way, again, when we're having a heightened experience, the tremor induces a heightened experience. And then we have to find our breath and our voice around that heightened experience, where our habit might be to shut it down, that heightened experience. I don't want to cry. I don't want to yell. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to have joy, right? A lot of what comes out, I had students the other day who were howling with laughter while they were tremoring. And they were like, is this wrong? Am I doing it wrong because I'm laughing? I'm like, no, you're releasing joy. There's joy that's moving through your body. Let's not question it. And that's what we do. We question everything instead of going, well, this is what's just my body. You said it, emotion. It wants to move, right? We're allowing it to move. And when we allow it to move, if you're not used to doing that, you're afraid of what's on the other side. At least that's my experience with my clients, is most of them won't do it. And they say it because they're afraid that if they allow the anger, if they allow the sadness, that they'll never stop raging, that they'll never stop crying. It's unknown,
Yes.
right? So they tend to hold on to that, which is again why I say it's baby steps, it's incremental. I don't want them to tremor so much that all of a sudden they feel out of control and it scares them,
Hmm.
right? But part of my training is to be able to bring them back so that you don't leave that room a disaster. You might be more open, but you're not going to leave and go, I can't function. That's not okay. It's not okay for somebody to give you tools to open yourself up, but then not give you the tool to come back down,
That absolutely.
right? I certainly had those. I've certainly studied with those people that were like, the more you hammer them, the better. And I don't care. I don't think they intentionally they didn't really care about us. I think they didn't have the tools. They didn't know. They were unaware of how or that it was damaging to re-traumatize us in the name of acting, in the name of voice, in the name of whatever it was. Right?
100%, 100%. I had also those experiences where I took workshops, and then these people, like you said, just you get access to all those emotions, and they're like, bye,
See you
back
later.
in your life, and you're like, no, help me. Yes,
Some
you need,
I
that's the power of mentorship, and that's the importance of
Mhm,
mentorship, and having the right
mhm,
right
mhm,
and proper training.
mhm. I was teaching someplace, and somebody was sitting outside of the door. Someone that worked at the school was like working outside of the room, and they heard screaming and crying
Okay.
in my room. And then they saw this person run out of the room, right, and leave. And after class, that person that was hearing all of this said to me, like with a big smile on their face, they're like, "Oh, sounded really good today. I saw so and so run out of the room. That's so great." And I looked at them and I was like, "No, that's not what I'm trying to get them to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's not good acting. That's not good teaching. If you want to know, like, if you were in the room and you understand what I do, it's a different story. But just to be psyched that somebody broke wasn't what I was after. As a young teacher, because I've been teaching Meisner, like I said, for 31 years now,
Mm.
I think I thought that that was good. That if the student had an emotional experience, I had succeeded. I no longer feel that way, right? Because that is about me. That is about, like, was I successful as a teacher to get them to dig deep and cry their eyes out? I mean, there's a balance to it. There's, yes, we're trying to get you to be open enough so that you can feel yourself, but not so much so that I feel good about myself for doing that.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, that person needs to learn. Like, that person is actually wants to be a teacher. And I was like, well, come work with me and see what that is. And they have. They have worked with me. They are understanding the difference between, like, berating somebody and supporting them in their experience.
How do we bring that technique to other people in other industries? Let's say, obviously not everybody's an actor who's listening, and they want to
Yeah.
know how they can connect with their emotions in a very effective, non-destructive way, and how they can use Fitzmaurice work
Hmm.
to cultivate a better sense of self, better relationships, better connection with themselves and others.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I do think it's what we've already been talking about. I don't think these techniques are for actors. I think they're for humans. I think that we are lucky enough to bring them to acting. But Fitzmaurice, I think that there's something when you say voice work to somebody that they think they're going to sing all the time,
Mm.
or that they're going to do, like, red leather, yellow leather, red, like that there's going to be a bunch of that, and that's not interesting to them. It's not that interesting to me. Like, those things aren't that interesting to me either, which is why I teach the way I teach. Once you get certified to be a Fitzmaurice teacher, Catherine says, now it's yours. Take it and go do whatever you want with it, right? Like, bring it into the world, incorporate it into your work. So that's what I did. But like I said, when somebody's interested, I'll have a conversation. I was at a brewery one day, and there was a man sitting next to me, and it was still like the end of the pandemic, so there was plexiglass in between tables. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
remember that? Where there was like this plexiglass? And my friend got up and went to the bathroom, and the man sitting next to me, I just looked over at him, and he looked sad to me. Talk about telling the truth. He just looked sad. And so I looked over at him and I was like, "Hi, how's it going?" And he was like, "Oh, hello." And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, okay." He just looked sad. And he's like, I don't know this man. Like, he's a business. What do I know? I don't know who he is. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is what I do for a living. And, forgive me. He's like, no, no, no. That's very interesting. And we started talking, talking, talking. And he's like, during the pandemic, I started playing music online. He was a businessman. He was not an artist. But he was like, I do like to sing, I do like to play, but I noticed this thing happens to me and this thing happens to me. And we were kind of hopping around to breweries. And the next one we went to, he was there. And he stopped me and we started talking again. And I gave him my card and he called me. And I worked with that man every week for a year
Wow.
because he was and again the feedback is always this isn't just for my singing, this isn't for this is and again working on that corporate level, it is I train the trainers, so even people who are working with people, I work with them so that they stay grounded so that they can do that. But you have to want, again, as I said, you have to want to seek out a better way to be. There was a class that I taught, my very first 3-day workshop that I did of Fitzmaurice. I think it was all actors except one guy who was a scientist. And at the end of the 3 days, he said to me, "This isn't an acting class. This is a life class."
Yes.
And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. But that's what, yeah, oh, that's so wonderful that you think that." And he kept in touch with me and he wrote to me and he said, "My job is to stare at proteins all day." He said, "I look through a microscope and look at that all day long." He said, "My work has gotten so much better. I can see better. I'm breathing when I look through the microscope. It's changing my life." He fell in love. Like there were so many things that happened to opening himself up and not behaving with that amount of tension. So I don't necessarily think I'm answering your question,
Oh, you are.
but am I? Okay.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because these are like great examples of other industries that people can use
Hmm.
the same work
Yeah.
as
We
human beings.
absolutely. We worked in the corporate world once. It was sort of my audition into working with this company, and we brought these senior level executives to New York City, and my boss wanted them to write, direct, and stage a play, and they were mad. They were mad. They had just flown in from all over the place. Things weren't going well in their company, and they were like, "What the hell are we doing here? This is ridiculous." Like, and they used much harsher words. And my boss was like, "Let's unpack that. Let's talk about that. Like, let get it out. Like, what's bothering you? Let's do it." Because they didn't find out what they were doing until they arrived. And
Mm.
so they were very, very resistant. But I had, we both showed each other our props. I had these, I had blue spiky balls, right? I had all of these little props and things that I brought with me. And then I had other colleagues who were doing other connection work as well. And man, I'm not going to give you all the details because it's very private. But what I will say is that at the end of 3 days, they were, I'm not exaggerating, lifting me off the ground, weeping, hugging, going, "I can't wait to go home and share this with my children. I can't wait to go home and talk to my wife." Or I remember one man saying, "Going home from work is going to be a very different experience." And I was like, "Why?" "Because you're actually going to share the truth with your wife." And he was like, right? And that again has been the experience across the board. That's why I say I'm not here to convince anybody to do anything. I say if you want to try and if it makes you feel better, you'll continue to do it. If it doesn't, you won't. And that's okay. And you'll find something else to do. Whereas I think a lot of people, again, preach, "This is what you need. This is what you have to do. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen." I had teachers like that. "If you don't work with me, you're never going to book a job." I was like, "But I had a career before I started working with you. Why am I all of a sudden not going to work unless I work with you?" Control, feeling like there's not enough clients out there in the world, like there's not enough to go around. Like that's that scarcity way of thinking,
Yes.
right? It's like I want to. So I always say, like, I want to get you to a place where you don't need me. It's not about me. It's about you. I'm always here if you want to come back, but I don't want you to feel like, "Oh my God, I can't do this without Lori."
Hmm.
Right?